What do you mean?
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Alright guys, let's go through section 44 of the Australian Constitution, the section that's at the core of the crisis that's seen elected members removed because of their citizenship issues. Alright, section 44 is, well, the 44th section, which is in chapter 1, the Parliament, part 4, both houses of Parliament. Alright, to save me reading them twice, I'll break down and go through each one after I read it. Alright, section 44, disqualification. Any person who, 1, is under any acknowledgement of alliance, obedience, or adherence to a foreign power, or is a subject or citizen, or entitled to the rights or privileges of a subject or citizen of a foreign power. Now that's the one that's kicked off all the citizenship issues amongst members of the House and the Senate, which is straightforward enough. I agree with. I understand why there would be problems with having people in elected office that hold dual citizenships. You want to know where a person in government's loyalty lies. That makes more than enough sense. That's why I think there should always still be a provision like this in our laws, but what they've done with it is an absolute mess. Like the video I just posted on how it's been used to go after Josh Frydenberg over his mum's possible citizenship, which I assume she didn't know about, fleeing the other side of the world as a child. And regardless, that's all just stupid little technicalities that really shouldn't matter, because Josh, the person in question, was born here. And if you can't run for office in the country you're born in, then probably freaking nobody should. Nobody can. And the other issue with this is if they play it like that with your citizenship, many people from the stolen generation were given British citizenship with their new, quote, families. And then that makes a number of Indigenous people unable to run for office here. So it's using just words and bits of paper as a tool to further restrict people. And yeah, fair enough, be an Australian citizen to be in the Australian Parliament. But with what they're trying to do, especially with the High Court, I think tomorrow, to deny someone who was born in this country from being in Parliament because of where their parents were born and paperwork, but we're going to have people in Parliament that are born in other countries, and that's alright because they have all their paperwork. See what I mean? It's a bit ridiculous. And what? If the leader of the Philippines, or Putin, or Trump, or Bolsonaro, shit, even Jacinta could just be like, every Australian has citizenship here too now. Are we just going to scrap the Parliament? Be like, oh, whoops, no one can really be a member or a senator now. Come on, we wouldn't do that. So we'll move on to the next one. 2. Is attainted of treason or has been convicted and is under sentence or subject to be sentenced for any offence punishable under the law of the Commonwealth or by a state by imprisonment for 1 year or longer. Another one that seems pretty straightforward on the face of it, and in the basic raw idea of it makes total sense, but the issue I have with this one is that's not an even playing field, because different states have different laws and you could get convicted for something somewhere, and if the same thing happened somewhere else, you may not be. Let's move on to number 3, the short one. Is an undischarged bankrupt, which is someone who's gone bankrupt, and I'm pretty sure the undischarged bit means they weren't granted a order of discharge by a court. I think it pretty much is they're bankrupt, but they still have debts they have to pay back and they can't borrow anymore. And yeah, then they can't get certain seats in office and whatnot. And insolvent, I think that means that if you got rid of all your assets, that still won't be enough to cover your debts. I'm neither here or there on this one. I don't know. I just figure we're not going to let people that are bankrupt in debt and have no money run. Probably also shouldn't let people with too much money run. I reckon if you got a couple of million, maybe we should put something in place to make it so it doesn't seem like you're just buying your way in. Or I get the mentality of, if someone's already rich, they might not do dodgy, corrupt stuff to get rich because they already got money. I'm still yet to see any evidence of that. I think greed grows greed. But on to the next one. 4. Holds any office of profit under the Crown or any pension payable during the pleasure of the Crown out of any of the revenues of the Commonwealth. Now this, I'm pretty sure, means if you're in your state parliament, can't just up and run for federal. And this would then explain why the new stand-in for old mate Christopher Pyne, what's his name, James Stephens, was listed as unemployed, which I thought was strange until I worked out he was working for South Australian Liberals before he became the federal candidate, because he had to be unemployed. And then there's been debate about whether this prevents just your local council members from running. And that's why these things need to be clear and updated and understood by everyone, because they affect everyone. Alright, now we'll move on to the last one. 5. Has any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in any agreement with the public service of the Commonwealth otherwise than as a member and in common with the other members of an incorporated company consisting of more than 25 persons, shall be incapable of being chosen or of sitting as a senator or member of the House of Representatives. That last one, it's a bit dicey, but my understanding is, like, if you run the post office, you can't be a member. Or what's another public service? You know what I mean. Where I think this one has even gotten a bit ridiculous, where I think a minister who owned a shopping centre that had a post office inside of it, which, I guess when people are doing their jobs, they're questioning that scenario up against this part of the Constitution. And I don't think he's become a politician to then run some heist through the post office in a shopping centre. At this stage, I'm just grateful somebody Australian owns a shopping centre in Australia. Alright, and the final bit of Section 44, but subsection 4 does not apply to the office of any of the Queen's Ministers of the State of the Commonwealth or of any of the Queen's Minister of a State for the receipt of a pay, half pay, or a pension by any persons as an officer or member of the Queen's Navy or Army, or to the receipt of pay as an officer or member of the naval or military forces of the Commonwealth by any person whose services are not wholly employed by the Commonwealth. And that word salad there, I'm pretty sure just means, but doesn't apply to you if you're in the military. You can still do it in more words or less. Well, there you have it. There's Section 44. I should do a what do you mean Australian Constitution. Well, I guess we just started somewhere in the middle. Alright, now with that all said, I'll show you what the real true disqualification is. This is the receipt you get when you become a candidate. 2016, it would just say probably $1,000 because before the last federal election, the fee for the House of Representatives was doubled, and I think Senate was already $2,000. That's a lot of money. Now, when you're going to hand in your paperwork and your money and get this receipt, you think you're going to hand over some form of identification. You have your passport on you and your ID cards ready and waiting, maybe even an old bank statement just to be sure, and you don't need to take them out of your bag. What do you mean? I'm not kidding when I say it is harder to get benefits, to get welfare, to get on Centrelink and not have them hound you. That is far more difficult, tenfold more difficult, 100 times more difficult than getting on a ballot of the federal election. You have to prove yourself so much more just for New Start than to be on that little green ballot paper. Studies show, my own personal little exercise here, and hands down, if you have the money to throw down and happen to be born in the right place, and have your parents born in the right place or with the right paperwork, haven't been to jail, don't work in the post office, easy sailing. Like, subscribe, and remember, take no shit but do no harm.